My sources tonight are an experienced group of former national security, defense, and intelligence officials. And Beth Sander, I want to start with you because you were the former deputy director of national intelligence. You were previously in the room briefing President Trump on classified information. What we just read there, which the Atlantic published because the White House, from the CIA director to the DNI and everyone else, said it wasn't classified. Do you believe that information was classified?
That is such an easy question. Don't you have a harder one? Yes, obviously. It is the most...
There's no doubt in your mind.
No, I think it's hysterical that we're actually having this conversation, because if you ask any military person, from the private to the general, is the movement of a plane, a ship, or a $220 million drone, which is the kinds that the Houthis have shot down before over their territory, is the movement of those into a battle, is that classified? No doubt in anyone's mind, right? This is not about whether someone has classification authority or whatever. And the requirement is that when you put something on signal, which is supposed to only be used in an emergency situation for anything sensitive, you are supposed to cut and paste that and put it into an unclassified email. Ask an F-18 pilot who was on this mission, do you think that what they wrote in there should be in an unclassified email? I rest my case.
I mean, Jamil, what do you think the answer from that F-18 fighter pilot would be?
Well, look, he certainly doesn't want any communications about his movements on an unclassified email, on Signal, anywhere other than in the command chain going directly to him. He can execute his mission. After that, it's all open for business, whatever the president wants to do. That being said, look, at some point in the mission, once the mission's underway, the information may or may not be classified. The president or anybody else decides to declassify it, including Secretary of Defense. The problem is the mission wasn't underway yet. And so the question is, was somebody trying to declassify it? Was that even in the discussion? Obviously not. They were clearly trying to keep it sensitive. They were talking about OPSEC on the chain. So what's clear here is they didn't know reporters on the chain. They didn't intend for it to get out. This was designed to be a workaround to not having communication systems that were robust enough to have the communications they needed to have in the heat of the moment. That's not a great answer. It's obviously hugely problematic. That is where they're going to end up on this. And I'm betting nobody's getting fired. And I'm betting Congress is not even going to look that deeply at it. This thing's going to blow over in 3 weeks. We'll still be talking about it. But this thing is not going that much further, I don't think.
On the firings, the White House would not rule them out today, I should note. And the president sounded a little skeptical of Mike Waltz there, more so than he has at all in the last few days. But obviously, no indication yet. Chris, you used to work at the Pentagon under President Biden, I should note. But when you see those messages and you hear what the president is now saying after being briefed on them, seeming to backtrack on whether or not he didn't offer the defense yesterday that nothing was classified, what stands out to you?
I mean, I don't know that we would expect a president who has called men and women wounded in combat as losers and suckers and denigrated other people's duty by...
which he denies, I should know.
Which he denies. I don't think that we should expect him to be standing up for the warfighter. Part of the reason why we keep this information classified is to keep the men and women overseas safe. Pete Hegseth sent a message, exact time. This is when the first bombs will definitely drop, before they even took off. It's incomprehensible what these guys were saying and doing before the mission even began.
As the former deputy director of the FBI, I mean, if Chris, working at the Pentagon, had revealed that information in the time period that Hegseth did on Signal, on something that was unclassified, I mean, what would be the result of something like that? Would the FBI launch an investigation into that?
Things like this happen mistakenly quite frequently, right? It's referred to in the community as a spill. When somebody puts something of a classified nature on an unclassified system, it's typically self-reported, and then the agency involved takes care of that internally. They'll do an investigation, they'll make sure that the information is off the system, and they may take action against the employee. It's employee action, things like that. When a spill takes place or information ends up on the wrong system or outside of the agency's control, and they think there's an intentional act involved, they make a referral to the Department of Justice, Justice gives it to the FBI to investigate for two reasons: possible criminal conduct, but more importantly and more immediately, to make sure there is no threat to national security here. So that's to get the information back, to analyze the devices involved, to talk to the people involved, to make sure that this wasn't done at the behest of a foreign adversary or done in a way that a foreign adversary could just take advantage of. I doubt any of that will happen. In this case, we haven't heard any serious talk about a real investigation by the FBI or anyone else.
And we talk about accountability, Caitlin. The fact that all these guys are out there saying that this was not classified information is almost even more troubling, that they believe that they can put this TikTok out in an unclassified setting and think that it's okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, when it comes to that, the argument has been, including from President Trump this afternoon in the Oval, was, well, the mission was successful, and that's what people should be focusing on. What is your response to that?
I think the mission was successful, but that's just not the point. The point is here, and I'm not absolutely certain that someone should be fired over this. What I would really love is that there's accountability, because Secretary Hegseth talks about that. And because we need to make sure that this doesn't happen again. I'm not sure this is a one-off. And I'm also very, very concerned that this administration is traveling. You know, you have Witkoff in Moscow, sitting in the anteroom, waiting for Putin with his phone out probably. I don't know. I'm just making that up. I don't know.
And the White House did say today that he had a government-issued device. He wasn't using his personal phone
That's
when
fine,
he was there.
But just because you are using a government-issued device, unless that's frequently scanned, you don't actually know that your device is secure. You've got to check, and we don't know. It can happen at any time. You can have that device where the screen is red. You can have a device where it can listen in on you. And as we saw with the mistaken identity of the person involved, you can take a screenshot and save that and send that around. And then that's on a part of your phone that's not secure. So there's a lot that can go wrong here, that they really should be not having the arsonists in charge of the investigation of the fire.
Well, and the White House is really focused on criticizing Jeffrey Goldberg. I mean, that was what I was going to follow up with today in the question of, you know, they're saying he's a registered Democrat. They don't like his previous reporting on President Trump, which is driving a huge factor in this. But Trump himself has questioned why Jeffrey Goldberg's contact was even able to be added, why Mike Waltz had it. But to that point of what that looked like, he was privy to this and no one noticed. It's not like they saw it and removed him. He removed himself and still no one noticed until he reached out for comment to the White House on Monday morning.
Yeah, look, this whole Jeffrey Goldberg, attack on Jeffrey Goldberg, whatever you might think of him, whatever you think about his reporting, whether he's a Democrat or not, doesn't really matter. Whether he's told a bunch of lies about the president, this story happened to be true. He was in the chat. He saw the information. There's nothing about this reporting that's not accurate. It's a bogus way to go down this road, and it's a mistake for the administration to go after Jeffrey Goldberg. What they ought to do is just say, look, we thought this was the exit way to run this thing. It wasn't the right plan. We need better comms devices. We're going to work on that. And you know what? We're going to move forward. The one thing I will say is I think you're right about President Trump, which is if he starts feeling like his feet are being held to the fire or there's a lot of attention in Congress or in the public too much on this, he will fire somebody, but not because they actually deserve to be fired, but because he wants the heat off of him.
Well, and in terms of an investigation, when he was speaking about Mike Waltz, the question was initially about him being in charge of this investigation. You just mentioned typically how this would go down with the FBI. The director, Kash Patel, was actually testifying on Capitol Hill today, and here's what he said.
Do you believe that it's now time potentially for the FBI to open an investigation into this?
I'm not going to comment on that.
Because you're the director of the FBI, you don't believe it's appropriate to comment on that?
Because there's a process in place, there's an ongoing litigation, and the National Security Council is reviewing this matter. And I'm not going to discuss any open or closed investigations.
That ongoing investigation, literally, the lawsuit happened today or yesterday afternoon. And the idea that you don't have an opinion on this at this point is frustrating to me.
No, it's not. I'm not going to prejudge any matters, and the men and women of the FBI will call the balls and strikes.
Reclaiming my time,
not
sir.
you.
Well, that didn't go well. And I don't know that I would describe this as an ongoing litigation. That's certainly not the case here. The way he could have answered that question as to whether or not they had received a referral from the Department of Justice, that's the first thing that has to happen here. And that would not have put him in a position of prejudging the case or indicating whether he thought that wrongdoing had taken place. So that was a bit of an unforced error, I think, on the director's part. Nevertheless, I think it is consistent with what we've seen has just been an abysmal reaction to this scandal. The ridiculous denials of the classified nature of this conversation are patently absurd, and it's backed the administration into a really an untenable position where if they come out and acknowledge the fault, done some very minimal work to figure out exactly what had happened, we'd be moving on from this thing.
We'll see what